Mencho. For decades, the world was obsessed with El Chapo, but while the cameras were fixed on the trials in Brooklyn, a far more dangerous phantom was building an empire in the shadows. His name is Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, known to the DEA and the streets simply as El Mencho. He didn't just run a cartel, he industrialized terror, transforming a group of assassins into the CJNG, a $50 billion paramilitary machine that declared open war on the state. From shooting down military helicopters with RPGs to patrolling American streets with invisible hands, his reach was surgical. He was a former avocado farmer and a disgraced small-town cop who hasn't been seen in public for over a decade. But today, the shadow is finally receding. This is the story of the most wanted man on earth, the brutal evolution of the drug war, and the rise of the King of Jalisco. In 1997, a prisoner from the Big Spring Correctional Center in Texas, America, returns to his home country of Mexico after serving a 3-year sentence. He had been sentenced for smuggling drugs into America and had already tasted prison life twice before this. After this, who knows what comes into his mind, but shocking everyone, he soon becomes a police officer in the Jalisco state of Mexico. His acquaintances were baffled as to how he suddenly went from being a criminal straight to becoming a part of the administration. But all of this was merely a ploy. His objective was to infiltrate the police department to learn the nuances of police training, security, and counterintelligence, so that later, when he ran his drug business, he would know how to handle the police without getting arrested. And that is exactly what happened. After learning all this, he quit the police job, changed his name to El Mencho, and built a drug cartel named CJNG, which today is the world's most ferocious and ruthless drug cartel. It is so dangerous and violent that it is often compared to dangerous terrorist organizations like ISIS. Anyone could be deceived by looking at the attire of this cartel. Thousands of its fighters wearing military-style uniforms go out on the hunt with army-like convoys, possessing weapons far more advanced than their own country's police. El Mencho's ruthless drug cartel painted the streets of Mexico with blood for their business. Be it civilians or politicians, police officers or army soldiers, journalists or judges, whoever stood in his way, he put them to sleep with death. The result of this brutality was that in a very short time, he firmly planted his flag in the drug world. In 2016, after the arrest of Mexico's biggest drug lord, El Chapo, El Mencho captured a massive chunk of his market share and became even more powerful. The amazing thing is that he once used to be just an ordinary bodyguard for a subsidiary cartel of El Chapo. How dangerous he has become now can be guessed from the fact that while America had a $5 million reward to catch El Chapo, they placed a $15 million bounty to catch El Mencho. Yet, despite this, he hasn't been caught to date. So, let's find out who is this rising sun of the drug world, El Mencho, who, after drug lords like Pablo Escobar and El Chapo, became the uncrowned king of the drug underworld in a very short time. To what extent does his organization CJNG go to execute its operations, and why has this most wanted criminal of Mexico not been caught till date? El Mencho was born in 1966 in a small town called Naranjo de Chila in the Michoacan state of Mexico. His childhood was spent with his parents and his 5 brothers. His family was large but extremely poor, and avocado farming was their only meager source of income. The condition of avocado farmers in Mexico has always been miserable because the farming has mostly been controlled by drug cartels who wouldn't even pay the poor farmers their rightful money. At that time, El Mencho's family was also forced to endure the atrocities of the drug mafias. Who knew then that one day a boy from this poor farming family would become Mexico's biggest drug mafia? Amid the severe financial crisis at home, El Mencho couldn't even finish his schooling and dropped out in the 5th grade to financially support his family through odd jobs. At this young age, one thing had settled deep in his mind. He had to earn a lot of money, no matter what it took. This desire to become rich pushed him into the world of crime, and at just 14 years old, he started guarding marijuana crops for the drug mafias. But how much money could he really make doing all this? His dreams were far bigger than these petty tasks. He wanted to do something massive in life, for which he decided to leave his home, his city, and even his country. Leaving Mexico,
The head of Los Torcidos was El Mencho. Soon, both factions clashed for control of drug trafficking in Jalisco. During this, El Mencho showed such a ferocious side that he painted the streets of Jalisco with the blood of his opponents. In one swift stroke, the murder rate in Jalisco more than doubled.
Anyone belonging to the rival faction was either killed or forced to flee the city. This was his first major victory, the echoes of which shook the Mexican drug lords. He took complete control of Jalisco's drug business, renaming his organization Cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación, CJNG, a cartel that would go on to create such terror that it would cost both the Mexican and American governments their sleep. To establish a supreme stronghold in drug trafficking, El Mencho set out to snatch territories from other cartels. The first name on his list was Los Zetas, Mexico's most dangerous and violently extreme drug cartel, originally formed by ex-commandos of the Mexican security forces. Even before forming CJNG, El Mencho had created a group called Mata Zetas, Zeta Killers, specifically to destroy them. His people posted several online videos framing Los Zetas as civilian killers and themselves as protectors. But once CJNG was fully formed, the Mexican public realized this organization was even more ruthless than Los Zetas. An example of this was seen when El Mencho escalated attacks to take control of Veracruz. As a result, on September 20, 2011, the bodies of 35 people were dumped from 2 trucks in the Boca del Rio area of Veracruz. According to CJNG's claims, these were all Los Zetas members, killed to send a clear message: this territory now belonged to them. El Mencho was exceptionally cunning. He began following the exact footsteps of the Los Zetas he was hunting, molding CJNG into their image. From violent tactics to military-like uniforms, advanced weaponry, and even armored vehicles, he copied almost everything. Whatever strategic advantage he noticed in rival cartels, he adopted it. Consequently, in no time, his own private army was assembled, an army dressed like the military, wielding weapons far more advanced than the nation's police. Seeing this rising power, hundreds of youths joined CJNG voluntarily. To recruit even more, his men posted propaganda videos on social media flaunting their power. Sometimes they broadcasted beheadings, other times they fired heavy artillery into the air. They also adopted Robin Hood tactics, occasionally providing food and shelter to impoverished youth or luring them with the promise of jobs. Once trapped, these boys were given brutal training to become CJNG sicarios, hitmen. In this way, El Mencho's army of 5,000 fighters was born. After decimating Los Zetas' power, El Mencho turned his sights on cartels like the Knights Templar, violently seizing their territories. Through ultra-violent tactics, he strengthened his drug trafficking network across Jalisco, Colima, Guanajuato, and Michoacán. Initially, CJNG was heavily involved in methamphetamine, handling everything from production to distribution. CJNG operated over 100 hidden meth labs, mostly deep within dense forests, where everyone from women to children was forced to work. Those who refused were killed. El Mencho was making massive profits from meth, but his dreams were of boundless wealth. He diversified his cartel, expanding into cocaine, heroin, and fentanyl. Under his leadership, CJNG became a terrifying entity, growing exponentially in record time.
Beyond drugs, to increase his revenue and power, El Mencho engaged in oil theft, human trafficking, extortion, and migrant smuggling. He even extorted protection money from local business owners and independent traffickers. He was the rising sun of Mexico's criminal underworld. While he systematically dismantled rival cartels, he became a massive headache for Mexican authorities. What troubled the government most was his aggressive insurgency. While other drug lords traditionally bribed corrupt police and politicians to keep the peace, El Mencho had only one rule: death. He wouldn't hesitate to open fire. If he felt someone was interfering, he had them killed. Police, military, politicians, journalists, judges, he preyed on anyone who stood in his way. The authorities threw everything they had at capturing him, but he slipped through their fingers every single time. Whenever the police raided his hideouts, his men would set up flaming barricades, torching roadside shops and vehicles to block pursuit, allowing him to escape safely. His past police training proved vital. Furthermore, he had recruited spies within the Mexican government and police force, meaning he often received advance warning of raids. While he always escaped, many of his gang members were killed or captured during these raids. Among those,
His eyes were now locked on Mexico's ultimate drug syndicate, the Sinaloa Cartel, the very organization where he once served as a bodyguard. To usurp their power, he initiated a war, killing numerous Sinaloa members. Witnessing the escalating violence and the death of his men, El Chapo himself brokered a truce with El Mencho in 2015. They divided territories and trafficking routes, promising a ceasefire. But in 2016, when El Chapo was arrested and extradited to serve a life sentence in an American supermax prison, El Mencho immediately broke the pact. He began slaughtering Sinaloa Cartel members to seize control of Ciudad Juarez and Tijuana, the two primary smuggling gateways into the U.S. He then waged war against Sinaloa in Colima, causing a bloodbath that tripled the local murder rate. He didn't stop there. In August 2016, his men kidnapped two of El Chapo's sons from an upscale restaurant in Jalisco, where they were celebrating a birthday. El Mencho intended to execute them for entering his territory uninvited. The Sinaloa Cartel only secured their release by begging and offering a $2 million ransom, along with massive drug reserves. With this ultimate flex of power, El Mencho signaled to the underworld that El Chapo's era was over. He was now Mexico's undisputed kingpin. With each passing year, El Mencho and CJNG grew more powerful. His geographical expansion never slowed, nor did his brutality. Anyone in his way was ground into the dirt. If he chose not to kill someone, he subjected them to such psychological terror that they lived in a constant, paralyzing state of fear. In 2020, CJNG sicarios blocked the convoy of Mexico City's police chief, Omar Garcia Harfuch, in Paseo de la Reforma, the most secure neighborhood in the capital. They unleashed a relentless barrage of over 400 rounds into his bulletproof SUV. Harfuch was hit by 3 bullets, but miraculously survived. However, 2 of his bodyguards and a female bystander were killed. From his hospital bed, Harfuch tweeted, officially naming El Mencho as the mastermind behind the attack and labeling him Mexico's ultimate criminal threat. Hearing this, El Mencho's morale only skyrocketed. That same month, he brutally assassinated a federal judge, Uriel Villegas Ortiz, and his wife in Colima for ruling against his cartel. He subsequently orchestrated the murder of Jalisco's former governor, Aristoteles Sandoval. To protect his empire, he didn't just carry out high-profile assassinations, he openly threatened the President of Mexico, the Secretary of Foreign Relations, the head of the Financial Intelligence Unit, and the Secretary of Security. By instilling absolute terror at the highest levels of government, CJNG aggressively expanded into 31 of Mexico's 32 states. Today, his cartel smuggles drugs into 6 of the 7 continents.
According to the U.S. Drug Administration, CJNG operates in dozens of countries and across all 50 U.S. states. His cartel is responsible for 1/3 of all drugs entering the United States. Every month, CJNG smuggles roughly 5 tons of cocaine and 5 tons of methamphetamine into America. The annual value of his U.S. cocaine trade is $8.1 billion, while the crystal meth trade generates about $4.6 billion. The Mexican government estimates CJNG's total assets at nearly $50 billion, with El Mencho's personal net worth hovering around $1 billion. According to high-ranking Mexican official Tomás Zerón, today there are only 2 real cartels ruling Mexico. The first is the Sinaloa Cartel, whose dominance is fading following the captures of El Chapo and El Mayo. The second is CJNG, an organization that achieved in its first decade what took Sinaloa multiple decades to build. CJNG is now rapidly conquering Sinaloa's remaining strongholds in Baja California, Sonora, and even El Chapo's home state of Sinaloa itself. This rapidly expanding empire has arguably troubled the U.S. government even more than Mexico's. For a decade, America has been hunting him for flooding their streets with narcotics. The DEA, working alongside Mexican forces, has captured hundreds of his associates. In a massive 2020 sweep, the DEA seized $20 million and arrested 750 CJNG operatives. Furthermore, many of his closest relatives are currently sitting in prison, including his son, Ruben, his brothers, Antonio and Abraham, his brother-in-law, Abigail Valencia, and his wife, Rosalinda. Yet, despite all these arrests, neither government has been able to lay a finger on El Mencho. In 2022, rumors circulated that he had died of kidney failure in a Guadalajara hospital. However, U.S. authorities dismissed this as a calculated disinformation campaign designed to throw law enforcement off his trail. After El Chapo, El Mencho is the ultimate prize for American law enforcement. The U.S. initially offered a $5 million reward for him, increased it to $10 million in 2018, and bumped it to $15 million in December 2024. But despite this astronomical bounty, he remains a ghost. The primary reason he evades capture is his calculated paranoia. While kingpins like Pablo Escobar and El Chapo craved fame and public adoration, fatal flaws that ultimately led to their downfalls, El Mencho despises the spotlight. He lives in extreme isolation, hiding deep within the mountainous, dense jungles of Jalisco, Michoacán, and Colima, constantly changing locations to stay ahead of the military. He never interacts with the public, and even within CJNG, only an elite inner circle has ever seen his face. Governments possess only 3 or 4 outdated photographs of him, making physical identification nearly impossible. Furthermore, he's highly disciplined. He allegedly doesn't touch drugs or even consume alcohol. Because his personality is the exact antithesis of the traditional flamboyant cartel boss, he has successfully evaded the law, living a quiet life hidden somewhere in the mountains. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, widely known as El Mencho and leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, died on February 22, 2026. His death occurred during a Mexican military operation in Tapalpa, Jalisco, where he was fatally wounded in a shootout. Reports indicate that U.S. forces provided support in coordination with Mexican authorities, but the operation itself was carried out by Mexico's military. Following his death, violent reprisals erupted across Mexico, including road blockades, arson attacks, and clashes with security forces, leading to significant casualties and unrest. Money and power in the drug world are limitless, but the harsh truth of the cartel underworld is that the throne belongs to no one permanently. The crown is temporary. The absolute summit where El Mencho sits today was once occupied by El Chapo and Pablo Escobar. On one side was the cunning El Chapo, who tunneled out of maximum security prisons twice. On the other was Pablo Escobar, who only agreed to go to prison on the condition that he build it himself and hire his own guards. In our next video, we will talk about El Chapo and Pablo Escobar. Until then, Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe our channel around the world. Also, remember subscribing is free, but it's very valuable for us and our hard works.